Hello. I am just setting things up and sharing this, and then I'll just be reading some poems. Thanks for hopping in. Hello. I am just about ready to get started. Very excited to spend some diligent time this week reading some poems. Great. Okay. Um, well, I thank you so much for dropping in, and so nice to see some folks who are excited to listen to poems. I try to give a little opening spiel about myself when I do these. Um, yeah, my name is Cody Stetzel. I am a poetry reading organizer here in Seattle. Um, I've, been participating in the poetry world for, it's 20 years or so now. And yeah, I mean, it kind of started off, I started organizing poetry readings when I was like 16, and I've never really been able to stop. Uh, Poetry has always been a source of connection for me. It has been a thing that enables me to actually communicate myself with the world around me, not just from a person to person perspective, but also quite literally like sitting in a room or walking into a business or walking down the sidewalk. um, Existence would be quite estranged to me had I not had it. So as a result, I find the more that I enable folks to kind of sit with poems and to listen and enjoy, uh, the more, I don't know, I just think the better off we all are. Taking 45 minutes once a week to actually listen to some poems is nice. Uh, Sorry, I didn't realize how froggy my throat was until I started talking. But yeah, uh, my last little bit, and then I'll kind of hop in. I specialize this in translated poetry. I'm a literary critic for a number of magazines. Um, and just absolutely love reading poetry from around the world and trying to highlight that as much as I can. So I'll post in the chat, but if you're ever interested in looking into it or exploring more, my kind of current side passion project is I've made a little clickable map for translated poetry where you can kind of go by country or by author, or what have you, and explore contemporary poetry in translation, which I find to be remarkably undernourished in terms of representation and accessibility. That all said, I will mostly be reading poems in translation today. You are welcome to make requests, or if you have any vibes that you're particularly interested in, I'm very happy to entertain that. I've worked in open books, Poem Emporium, which is one of two poetry only bookstores in the US for about 10 years now. And Lord, would you not be surprised by all the people who walk into a poetry bookstore and ask, "Hey, do you have any good love poems?" Or, "Hey, I'm looking for a poem about cooking." So I'm quite adept at finding very, very broad themed poems spur of the moment. That all said, let's dive in. Uh, very first book that I'm going to be reading is a trilingual collection, actually, published from Deep Vellum Books down in Dallas, I want to say. This is titled Carapace Dancer by Natalie Toledo and translated by Claire Sullivan. I believe a Mexican author, but writes in Zapoteca as well as Spanish. So just a really cool kind of collection of poems, and it's always really fun to bear witness to a translator dancing between 3 languages, let alone just the usual 2. So I'll read a smattering of her poems. This is titled A Seer's Path. How many times did I poke my head into the heart of a basket so that no one would forget me? I ate warped tortillas in my hiding place so I'd marry an old man. I played with the dog's tail and became a liar. Beneath our household altar, I ate a brittle turtle egg that dried out my lips. A buzzard cast a spell on my slingshot when I lost myself in the dance of his flight. It rained at all my weddings because I licked the cookpot clean too soon. I crossed 2 knives over my eyes to slice up shame's gaze. How could you ever draw near if every night I hung a string of garlic in my bedroom and in my window a salt-caked shirt from my uncle who left mermaids pregnant? Something I love about that poem in particular is it sets up a fairly, like, predictable journey at first from, uh, straightforward "if this, then that" kind of statements, and then slowly, devolves from the kind of tangible and the real into this unreal, into this absolute kind of dreamlike myth. This is the titular poem, Carapace Dancer. Can I tell you something? All that's left of that innocent creature who caressed a deer beneath the almonds trees' purple light is a scorpion that bites her veins. Trapped in brackish water, prints stamped onto her clothing. When I was a girl, I loved to walk in the mud. My mother roasted chilies, slipped them between my toes to heal my wounds. In those days, no one measured me because my people spoke with clouds. I'll tell you one thing more. I loved you. How you didn't settle for my image in the well, but went to my birth cord home. You understood why I changed, became someone else. You knew me as I was, that amidst so many brambles there was joy. You said, "Tell me what lullabies sang you to sleep." Yes, I said. There are serpent words curled upon my back, but I no longer speak with anyone. I stopped speaking the language of the silent. I have revealed my sign. I have erased my face. My portrait speaks with all the dead. The wind has winnowed my seeds. When my root went to crack, I never looked back. I think Natalie Toledo, as an author, does a really extraordinary job of kind of informing and opening up readers to the um, possibility of being comfortable sitting with uncertainty. I think that's something that, you know, I find myself asking quite a bit is how to sit with uncertainty. But one of the ways that poetry helps to accomplish that kind of lesson or that meaning making is by informing you as a reader that, sometimes you don't have to follow along every single line um, to generate meaning or to produce an affect in yourself or in others. Um, I would say reasonably. I mean, I've read probably thousands of books of poems at this point, and maybe understood 10% of them. Um, but I preach that uh, understanding, I think, is not necessarily, it's more overrated than necessary when it comes to art. Um, I think what really matters is feeling, and if the poem makes you feel something. And if not, that's also okay. You can just turn a page and find another one. So I'm going to switch to another poet. This individual is named Garus Abdul Malekian. Um, this book, Lean Against the Slate Hour, is one of my favorite ones that I read during the pandemic. I mean, in as far as it is over, but I think specifically in like 2021 is when I first encountered this. This is translated by Ahmad Natalizadeh and Idra Novi. If I remember correctly, yeah, Abdul Malekian is an Iranian poet. Forest. Closed eyes open wider, and the eyelid is a curtain extending the landscape. Let the river filter through you. Let its sands deliver sediment into your heavy fatigue. Let yourself be a living part of death, and let roots trust in your death. Forest. You are a single tree, fleeing the earth a thousand ways. The bird of reconciliation. A road will not lead to a dream, nor a dream to a road. I return to the faded colors of the world, to my mother's hair before my father braids it, to the soil before you fall asleep in it, and to that small, poignant book with its prophet on a deserted island. From each other we have fled toward each other, from the earth into the earth. And that little bird, that was my dream, and yours has a leaf forced into its mouth now to keep it silent. We have fled from night into night. Dip your hands into that dark and believe whatever you touch. Again, this book, I don't think I mentioned the title. It's called Lean Against This Late Hour. Um, what I think the poems in this book, they're much shorter, very easy to kind of slide into. And I think the poet also does a thing where the volta, the transition, the turn at the end of a poem is much more clearer than with some of the others that I've read historically. And so as a result, like, uh, it really does feel as though um, the poet, he's aware of this kind of payoff moment and the kind of cycle of attention that a poem demands. It does make me kind of interested and like poems like this, I think, easily get simplified into this kind of category of like easy poetry. You know, like you can start from first line to last line and you generally know what the poem is about. But I think that's an unfair statement. I don't think easy poetry is necessarily the right kind of like binary or categorization for these types of things. And rather, it's more of an attention to craft and to understanding that like sometimes the poem is a moment, you know, a singular moment. Sometimes the poem is a statement, a singular statement. And uh, I mean, I think it was one of my poetry professors in graduate school who taught me, I think, the Charles Bernstein essay where go in short goes over this kind of explanation that all poems arrive from uh, the moment generative of sound, which is to say, like, whatever it is that made you have to make some kind of noise as a result. So, in some ways, like, you know, turning a corner and seeing someone unexpected and you letting out a spooked little, like, oh, that's as much of a poet or a poem as, uh, you know, there's little cue cards. You're in a TV audience and they say, cheer loudly, and you do. Um, but I think going back to my point on easy poems, this is just speaking to very specifically a finite moment generative of speech. And yeah, I don't think life needs to be complicated all the time. I think it's overrated. Um, I think it's fun to find a complicated poem and to sit with it and to really digest it, but I don't think that can be all that we read and enjoy. Moving forward, this is a book titled Into Muteness by Sergio Espinosa, translated by Kelsey Banada. This is out of Belize Books, which is a tremendous, mostly Spanish language press, but they have just fantastic works all around. Um, the poems in this book are a lot of like borderline prose poems, but I would call them more what aphorisms in a way. But I love the like extremely small, like the indie presses, especially in translated poetry, because they always do very interesting things in terms of their design of books. Like this particular press puts all of the like basically duplicates the publication of the book in its original language in like a second half of the book. Whereas most books that I see that do offer a binary or a bi language um, publication tend to just put, you know, the original language side by side with the translated language. Um, I like to see the different interpretations because I think it shows an attention to and a care for how a work is presented. Whoever here destroys a myth won't leave without first creating another body that now is breath, that has no knowledge, but knows us, the sunflower, has inhabited us for just an instant. We are another. We are born from a faceless body. We go toward the Odyssey. We are shaped by the banks of Lake Stymphalia. Our paintbrush is his seed, in silence as though he had returned from death, while I drew him, an identity in sap. Everything with seeds should accord with everything, the meat with the meat, the bone. So I imagine you have gathered this, but I am transitioning from the straightforward poem, from a singular moment to the intangible poem of meaning is particularly difficult. And kind of devolution into strict image and sound as opposed to logic and linearity. Your visits are these milliliters, the cleaning and the sulfur flavor. I speak, I say my stutter. Are these walls? Do you know these walls? I ask, which do you know? Better the path or the volcano who inspected your entrails? Choose strawberry, mint, or the shaman's fruits. My stutter is this canvas here next to the color black. I've seen the future in your stomachs. I'll draw a map bearing the name of the most fragile extremity of your body. We'll structure my throat, and I'll withstand the air at last. These walls will have the color of waking. I'll say the word. I ask, which do you know? Better silence or muteness? Muteness. We Aurora, we have ended, and only Aurora will come to know the beginning the question. Aurora, Aurora, Aurora. The sentence, "Who is it that unites us?" is unknown to us. My beginning was with you, and maybe, Aurora, may that be the only thing separating us. I spin. You've been this drought. A man in black bites the corners of a city rotting at its foundations. We spit. With paranormal simultaneity, born of our saliva, is the river that brings our throats back. I spin the stoplights, reveal my silhouette for the umpteenth time, sculpted from the smoke of voices, cartographic maps to anchor in my chest, harbor of doves and pencils. This bridge, this spin, this drought has been you. Again, Sergio Espinoza is the author. Um, what is there even to say? I mean, the poems are so full of life. Uh, there's definitely an eroticism in all of them, so bodily, so physical. There's so I read it I read the poems, especially in like a performance setting, with a type of urgency to them, which I think I instinctively read most like prose poems or like block-ish style poems in that way, which is less to offer um, that I believe all prose poems are inherently fast, nor is it to imply that uh, poetry has to be urgent. In fact, I would say that most poetry is trying to teach you how to exist without urgency. Um, but these poems in particular, there's so much drama in the lyric. There's uh, so many explosive vocabulary that I think it really kind of demands a certain flair and pace in performance. It'd be really fun. I mean, you can ship me off to whatever country, anywhere, everywhere, to listen to these performances live in original language because I would love to hear author interpretation of all of their work. Mm. But yes, poetry absolutely is trying to teach us to exist without urgency. The I think the whole point of a book of poems is to be able to, I mean, in its ideal state, is to sit under a tree somewhere in fairly nice weather or tolerable enough weather, even, and just read it for an afternoon. And it's only 78 pages. And if you were really trying, you could read it front to back in 30 minutes. But what happens if you stretch 30 minutes to 4 hours? Who's going to bat an eyelash? No one. It's not an affront to God, that's for sure. It's just a small sacrifice of time for yourself. Another book, this is titled Speaking in Song, out of the UK press Shearsman Books. This is from the author Pura Lopez Colome and translated by Dan Belm. If I remember correctly, this is also a Mexican poet. Yes. Yeah, she's fantastic. And I can't wait to read this for y'all. Anno Domini 1. Concerning the bitter truth. She passed me by, the one I would have liked to be. Nearly flew by, smiling at no one. Passed by for the sake of passing, so strange, so familiar. The world had grown so much, it needed no threshold. Whole, extramural, no astrolabes or alphabets to bewitch little children before sweating blood, sweating all this body's rain, which does not purify or petrify. It impersonally hurts. It hurts without edges. It hurts that nothing can control it. It hurts that this is how to explain it. 2. It pours. It pours out of me. The droplet pours the vessel, violently seeking, and when it dries, surprise, neither cloths nor scabs. 3. Cloth of tears, divine face shaped in it, eyeless and featureless. You are the voice I need, that I miss so much, that I long for and can't manage to recall, not even in dreams. Endure it, I intuit. They dictate. Don't put up with any more, I flee. I still believe in life to come. I haven't let go of to and fro and vice versa. I haven't managed to bleed it dry, the world spilling over me, or give it back the splendor of being a thing, its fluid self, without altars or images, and may it answer with golden dust until the dawn. So I've done a few shorter poets who write in shorter kind of statements. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, man, South America and Central America are putting out such fantastic poets, and I'm so enamored by the presses that are actually captivating and capturing them. Um, but uh, this individual, she's so good and kind of reaches for this kind of beautiful intertwinement between the divine and the erotic. You know, there's this like yearning of like a very intimate interpersonal uh like, you know, I want you so bad that I would die if I don't get just one whiff of your, you know, your smell, you know, things like that. I think of like the James Joyce love letters, which if you know, you know, but um mixed with this kind of like, uh, greater than thou holiness, divinity of, you know, when love affects you so much that it becomes this sort of, godly element. Um, and I think it's just so profound to listen to someone when they, uh, really dance in the elements of godliness and yearning. It reminds me of, so I don't actually plan any of this out besides the books that I'm gonna read, so I apologize, but, uh, it reminds me of, uh, pretty much my favorite poet ever that because I've just been speaking and I'm, like, enraptured by, um, other thoughts of, like, reading poems, I can't remember the name of her, so I'm gonna go walk over to my shelf really quick to check this out because it would drive me nuts if I can't remember her name, so I apologize. Yeah, so, like, my favorite poet ever is this American Rebecca Seiferl, and this collection, Wild Tongue, RM specifically, uh, I think you would really love her. She is very much so up your alley. Um, I've wanted to, like, get in touch with her and, like, interview with her or whatever for the longest time, but she's one of those, like, I think she's in her, like, late 70s or, like, early 80s now and is just has moved into this, like, reclusive life, you know? And I'm just like, "Oh, no, like, have I missed my mark to, like, actually get the chance to, like, fangirl over my favorite living poet?" Um, but yeah, no, she's tremendous. Um, you know what? I'll I'll break my fast and read one poem by her just because I try to read only translated poets here, and she's very much so just in native English, and um, but I just I got her off the shelf, so might as well. The Chimera. To begin with, are all beautiful. Their sleek flanks of hurricane, their personification of cloud, a blue silver of cat eye in temples of oak leaf, with lips of echo or purring lion throat, kisses of dragon flame or sibilant peaches, cunts of sea snails and involutions of mother of pearl, milk and honey nipples in each pore, nails of the moon sparking on the hard stone, the smile they smile upon this passing head alone, the glances of fire upon hand, that throat, glances of aurora given to the sweet and salty tears of the sea, sandpaper tongue, licking their way through the finest hair, a thicket of cat's eyes and limbs of serpentile entwining, wild berries prickled to ripeness by the falling lip of fingerprint or taste bud, once human too, born in maternal cream, wanting to be as much as anyone else, driven by the desire to be loved into human habitations, instead caught as images of unrepentant injury in the net of another's eye, changed into voiceless replications, raptors of the banquet table, banished to cobweb and spider's bite, leaving a kiss shyly upon that ankle that kicks free of its heavy slumber, its exhausted dreams, thrashing limbs into open air, a knot sleepwalking in the fetal brain until you wake, while looking in a mirror. See, you have given birth to the chimera that you are, the lovely, the lively locked, decomposing the self into some more tangential music. Yeah, she's so good. I don't have like a lot of words, or okay, I have too many words to speak about Rebecca Seiferl without just kind of yapping and rambling for the next like 2 hours. Um, which I should at some point get back to work, but eh. Um, but I hope it makes sense. Like I'm not going to over explain it. I hope it makes sense why I think you would love her. Um, and if you want, send me a message after this and I will like happily mail you one of her books because it is so hard to find her work these days. Um, but yeah. um, any whoozle. Moving forward, this is a Ukrainian author that I wanted to read also. I actually wrote a review of her, maybe 4, 5 years ago. Um, Irina S- Starovoit, uh, translated by Grace Mahoney. It's out of Lost Horse Press's contemporary Ukrainian series, which Lost Horse Press is at the corner of Washington and Idaho. Um, and they've just been quietly publishing like a 40 some odd book of living Ukrainian poets, um, which I just think is so genuinely impressive. And I hope to God that they get enough funding and celebration to continue this forever because it's so necessary. But yeah, it's just everything that I read coming out of Ukraine is tremendous. Uh, and yeah, I wanted to read one of these. Another really cool woman poet and just writing about, being a woman in different times, especially in war or when trying to be, a literary figure and the kind of weights of, implicit misogyny trying to keep one down. Also, no titles to her poems, so just kind of hopping into them. Sometimes we think of our homeland as a personal matter, a mole, a fate, a scar of memory. The unnecessary cannot be crossed out. We live in a clay nation sculpted from several halves. When life was blown into the clay, we broke the jars with our neighbors. The left hand erases all that the right draws. The whole seems less than the sum of the efforts. We wake to lulls in the media with the sense that we who remember are last. The tomb of the unknown soldier could be a family vault, half without gravestones and some without coffins. The war of all against all continues. See comments on the web. Our friends depart, the best, the closest, and we orphans don't know what to do with their blogs and Facebook pages. The history of every homeland starts from a book of faces, of family photos with several unknowns, some characters scratched out. About others, there is no one to ask. Maybe this is why we return to stay, for a personal matter, because Bodanchik is just like Bodan. You were only in an episode of my life, but it was an Oscar worthy performance. You taught me to brush the walls by sight, through which you could see and choose the steps by which you could better yourself. Now, everywhere, elevators replace stairs, but even Mies van der Rohe had these night sweats, the kind Hitchcock would be jealous of. He didn't drive them away with a scream. How can you build skyscrapers after Auschwitz? Less is more? And what does it all mean? And after 9/11, let's not talk politics like in the elevator. There's no exit between floors. Let's talk about the imperfection of a world that wasn't built by us. Well, and who of us managed to leave it better than we found it? Now they say the most fashionable architects build not buildings, but places of memory. I rest my case. Thanks to I don't know whom, the blueprint doesn't always become a building. The forecast doesn't always become the weather. Um, Something that I've noticed in reading enough Ukrainian poetry and translation in particular is culturally it's so um, I guess common in their writings to invoke things that like are so seemingly implicitly anti-poetic, like Facebook pages in the verse or, talking about the news and the weather forecast. But uh, I love the shiningness of the everyday in these poems because they really speak to that effort of, you know, we might be in a miserable time of war. We might be in a miserable time of the world. Uh, and every little cog that we are ensorcelled by is going to affect the language and the verse that we go after, that we write with, that we communicate with. It is this kind of, I think of them like Ukrainian poetry is perfect for showcasing how cultures survive crisis. Like, it's really combining every waking moment with the verse that one needs to push forward, to survive, to endure. Um, and truly, I mean, like, this is not to like make light of any situations, but like, there, you have to have humor, you have to have joy, you have to have friends and kinship and intimacy and family through the suffering. Because if you don't, they've won. And I think that's the lesson that I keep learning over and over again from poetry is that the more you let them make you suffer, the more they've won. can read Lobster Palaces by Ann Kim, who is a Korean American. I just wanted to read a couple. They're very short, but um, just kind of nice palate cleansers, if you will. Snow. Several billion dragons wrestling change themselves into thinking they are really two men in a mountain cabin in the winter. It's bright, so they switch on the kerosene lamp. The Warlord. The violence of answers delayed has pulled summer down to a form of governance. Walled towns slouch away in the haze, gullies abandoned to the gathering dead. By stone steps, the bird headed boats unload assassins, boot soles crusted with offal and spit. The steaming shores advance and retreat. The limbic node rules aggression, hunger, and ritual. Nothing stands in the way, not even the attendant scarf of green and subtle argument. To the four corners of the central plain, landscape after darkening landscape, thunderheads unstable but fast approaching, raindrops untasted but on the way, the wind that starts up, almost a god. Um, yeah, I won't read too many more of hers. I just love to, uh, I love this particular book because it reminds me when I'm sitting down that um, you really you can write just about anything, and I don't mean that in terms of like saying like being derivative or shooting down. I'm saying that more in the sense of like language shapes how we feel, right? So, but it's not a linearity, it's not a logic within the language, it's just language. And so in these instances of these poems, uh, like reading a fairly nonsensical, like strictly image poem that feels almost like someone, is like I'm tripping or uh, hallucinating in various ways, helps to remind me that, my feelings don't have to be logical, understandable, translatable, anything. It can just be a feeling, and that's okay. Two more that I'm going to read, and then I'll call it quits because I'm growing increasingly uh, drier in voice. I was out at the Seahawks celebratory parade yesterday, and while I'm not a particularly like large crowd enthusiast generally, uh, can't help but be a woo girl, wooing out there. But as a result, my little throat is uh, combative with my desire to speak. This book is titled Behind the Treebacks. It's by Iman Mohammed, translated by Jennifer Hayashida. This is out of the tremendous Ugly Duckling Press, which is been around for like 30 some odd years. Um, and they resist a lot of uh, digestibility practices. But this is from the Swedish. Drunk in blue white light, the rain's silhouette glitters in fountain. Birds hover in silence, sleepy survivors. Want to call the embrace, men move along store windows, gravel swirls, every surface wears a face owned by orgasm. Fire and ground caress each other, a loop of pleasure from several days ago, and the fan becomes ornament in the ceiling. Extraterrestrial noodle soup drips onto my breasts. I scrub through the skin into another sphere, close my eyes on the wavy couch, want to enter the time I see myself touching. In the draft between doors, oxygen can be heard breathing heavily. Glasses are raised and wine runs down on toenails. Convergence is undertow of hair beneath water. A rug in the living room. It depicts flowers and rectangular shapes. Color enters one another. The movement of shoulders warms its thread further. Fire and black sky. Anguish twists the little heart when you recall your body in flames during the playful act. Fire and yellow sky. So these are just to give you a view. These are very, very short poems and again, untitled across the page. But yeah, man, sometimes like the poem just kind of the verse takes over and you just kind of read it, um, you know, without really knowing what it is you're doing. Uh, my friend Patricia, who I just reposted one of her Substack essays, is a really like profoundly meditative, like bodily writer. So tries to incorporate as much physicality to her writing practice as possible. And uh, I think for me, I try to incorporate as much sound in my writing practice as possible. Not in the sense of like, attention to meter and counting every stress and syllable, because I think that's sometimes, I mean, it objectively, like a good attention to uh, meter is going to make the line sound better. However, I think the math of poetry is extremely overrated and mostly invented so that, non poets can feel better about themselves and not understanding a poem. Um, but, uh, with something like that, there isn't really an explanation for me as to why the poem kind of takes over, but, um, it does just feel like this uh, kind of shared human language. Like, poetry is this shared human language where even if we don't know what everybody is trying to say, um, the sound of it all, whether we're incorporating, the consonants of syllables being articulated uniquely, or alliteration, or pauses, stresses. Sometimes even just pairing different, like complex words next to each other makes the tongue and the glottal noises kind of stick together like a fudge. Um, it helps to uh, invoke humanity. It helps to reassure you that, we are just imperfect creatures trying to communicate with each other in ways that stress the fact that, you know, I wish you no harm. And in fact, sometimes I even wish you happiness. Last poet that I'm going to read, it's a chonker of a book, but absolutely deserved. This is the Miracle of a Poet, Paul Celan, who, if you haven't read before, I would not recommend starting with the collected works. This is half of his collected works. Um, I would recommend starting with his collected works. He's that good. I can almost guarantee that he will astonish you. His whole story, I mean, he is a post World War II poet, writing in German and writing in the way of just absolute devotion to language and the dissolution that has to be enacted in language after a time where it feels like the world has utterly collapsed around you. The translator for this particular work is Pierre Jory, who sadly passed away very recently, but just similarly, like, groundbreaking translator, cannot be honored enough for all of the work that he did over time. Cannot be honored enough for just how good he was. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to find the poem that I wanted to read from this collection, and I thought I just remembered the page, but I don't. So this was a humbling exercise, but that's okay. Thread suns above the gray black wastes, a tree, high thought, grasps the light tone. There are still songs to sing beyond mankind. You, with the in the dark glass gazed at, you, one, with the beheld, substanceless, light mirror surface innermost through the 10-towered desert, gate your messenger self steps before you, stands for the length of a tri-vowel in the high redness, as if the people in the distances were once again gathered around you. Do you throw the written upon anchor stone? Nothing holds me here. Not the night of the living, not the night of the intractable, not the night of the nimble. Come, together let's roll the doorstone in front of the untamed tent. You transfathom, color push, number toss, misconception. Many say it's you. We disknow it. Many negate themselves on you. You who affirm them one by one for yourself. Insurrectionary like the stone courage, given as present to the hand said, who raised himself to the world at the seam of the turned silence and of all danger. My soul, you ward, crease bent, hears you, a thundering, in your neck hollows my star, learns how one sags away and becomes true. I finger it forth again. Come, confer with it this very day. A star listens to a light, an hour repudiates an hour. Hear the heavy as your rolls over you, your bloody saliva delights in obsessed dust mote. A mother stump leads an early face through a pane. Its god mowing paces off the image front on the ridges of the upper cradle. I think that's what I'll end it on. I don't have like a strong closing poem from his because they're all simultaneously strong and ethereal. But it's, it's hard to convey in reading. I'm going to criticize myself here, but uh, one of the things that he really made for himself, he really coined, was the concept of just like mashing words together. And so, like, if language wasn't as linear or as logical, or it was too linear, too logical for the devastation that he was feeling, he would just push words together. Um, Thread sun, for instance, no spaces there, just the words thread and sun in one letter construction. And he does this all over the place. Later on in the poems, he's kind of mashing this. He's you can read through his live history of experiencing such grief and such great loss that it's absolutely he has to abandon language. And I think what I can't deny is that when I read his poems, truly, I understand what it means to grieve. Um, I understand that grief isn't an imperfect process. Grief keeps you angry and it keeps you energized and inflamed, but it also keeps you stagnant and like a boulder. And it's all encompassing, but also sometimes it's something that you just want to tuck away in the corner and forget about. Um, and most of all, when you are truly in it, when you are grieving, there's no words that can bring you comfort or solace or justification for the collapse that you've experienced. I think that's really it. I mean, if I can leave you with one lesson, it's reading across borders is going to save the world. Um, we've read Argentinian, Mexican, Chilean, German, Swedish authors today, and probably more. Oh, Iranian, um, and I I wouldn't be half as cool as I think I am without translated poetry. So, hope this was nice for you all. Hope you enjoyed a little break to read some poems. I'm gonna go drink some tea with honey in it and maybe do some work. Maybe not. We'll see. That's what the day has in store. Thank you so very much for being here. Much love to you all. Read more poetry. Bye bye.